I'm Julie Lyles Carr. This is the Modern Motherhood podcast from All Mom Does. And today we're going to talk about what to do when you hit the wall. When my husband and I brought our first child home from the hospital, Madison, we were so excited. We just were so thrilled to have this little baby in our house, and we were inexperienced young parents. And when we got her home, we couldn't wait to get her out of all the swaddling and the car seat and all of the stuff and just lay her on our bed and look at her and let her kick and let her play and all of the things. And so we did that. And we were just amazed at how frenetically and strongly she could kick her legs and wave her arms. And then all of a sudden, she reached a tipping point. She started to cry inconsolably. She was so worked up. She was just so upset. And over time, I began to realize, I have allowed her to get too overstimulated. She hit the wall. She hit the wall in terms of how much her newborn reflexes and senses could take in this new, fresh world that she had walked into. And so I had to learn over time to make sure that we weren't letting her be too free, to make sure that she did have times where she felt cuddled and swaddled, all of those things, because otherwise all of her senses would just go into a complete overload. And the only thing she knew to do at that point was just cry and wail in terms of trying to communicate to us, hey, I need to be wrapped up for a little while. I need to be cuddled in close. All of this stimulation, all of these new things I'm having to encounter, they're just a little too much. Well, the reality for all of us is we have entered a new world. A world in which we have not lived before when it comes to the pandemic, all the shelter in place, all the different mandates that are coming down. And of course, every day seems to bring new information that's hitting us and we're having to deal with. Everything from the way that perhaps our governor is dealing with something to the difference in how our mayor is dealing with something. For some of us, we are in states that are still in complete lockdown, but we have friends and family who are in states where a lot of the restrictions are lifting, even though some of their numbers look the same as ours. It can all be so overwhelming, so much stimuli going on. And you lay on top of that, for many of us, we've had to figure out new ways to work. And if we have been working at home before, but we haven't been working at home with the kids there, that's a completely new environment. And if we have worked at home before, and maybe we've even had the kids with us, we might have a spouse who is now working from home. You just keep layering on all of these changes and all of the things you're having to do with. And let me tell you, it's no doubt that you may come to a place where you hit what we call the wall. I'm a runner. Well, let me back up. I'm usually a runner. I think of myself as a runner. But, sometimes I have those seasons where I'm not as much a runner as a walker, and sometimes I'm not as much a walker as a wannabe. But when I'm living at my best, I really am a runner. I love to run. I love distance running, the feeling of accomplishment. I'm not great in Zumba classes or anything that involves dance steps. I'm not terribly coordinated. When I watch some of the things that you CrossFit athletes do, I can't even figure it out. I can barely figure out how to make a burpee happen, not to mention I can't even imagine trying to do that repetitively over and over. I see some of you out there and you're doing amazing things with your yoga classes or your Pilates classes or your bar classes, and I applaud you fully. I'm so impressed. And the one thing I can only seem to achieve or be pretty good at is you just kind of point me in a direction and you say, run from here all the way over to there and listen to your 80s rock playlist while you do it. And I'm like, now that I can do. Can't do a pretzel in Pilates, but I can run. But when I'm living at my best and I'm running, it's so interesting to me that I can go through a period of time where I can get that mileage, I can be hitting those times that I want to hit, and then one day, a random day, where I haven't changed a whole lot, I don't feel like I'm not, underhydrated, I don't think that the temperature is too crazy or the humidity's wild or anything else, just an average day, I'm out for a run, and all of a sudden I will hit what runners proverbially call the wall. And what's meant by the wall is this. The wall is this place where you've had conditioning. It's not that you don't know how to take a step forward. It's that you just feel like you can't. That everything in you is so depleted. And whether that is from a physical standpoint or a mental, emotional, soul standpoint, all of a sudden, you who have been running well feel like you can't go anymore. Now, I used to look at it in the type of running, and sometimes I can get a little legalistic in my own head. I mean, I'm the girl who didn't want to stop and walk through a crosswalk. Like I was trying to figure out ways to be Frogger because in my head, if I went out and said that I ran 5 miles, that meant that I ran every step of those 5 miles. That's what it meant to be honest about the mileage I was doing. But my running partner would say to me, Jules, hey, whoa. It's okay to not dodge cars. You can stand at the crosswalk and wait to cross. When we would do races, she was the one who taught me, hey, walk through the water stops, take a pause, take a beat, get yourself hydrated again. And it was hard for me because it seemed like, well, is that cheating? You know, I think when it comes to the way a lot of us are trying to manage through this COVID crisis, we can sometimes set the standard for ourselves in a way that is a little bit unsympathetic to what's going on. For some reason, we seem to think it's more noble if every day we attack the day and we get through all the work and all of the kids' homework and the spelling words are done and the kitchen counters are cleaned off and we were nice to our spouse. And if we have days like that, that's great. But even for someone who is conditioned well, even for someone who's been navigating it well, there will come a day where the overwhelm of the thing hits you. And there can be lots of reasons behind it. It can be just one more thing. It can be the straw that breaks the camel's back, or it can be something that just hits you kind of sideways. You saw something on your Facebook page from a friend that was so sad, and it just launches you right into the wall. Or you worked your heart out to get that project done and you've been doing it while juggling all the things, and then your manager on a Zoom call kind of made you feel less than. You hit the wall. Or it may be that the wall just comes out of nowhere, like I was telling you about sometimes when I'm running. There doesn't seem to be any reason, but all of a sudden the overwhelm hits you so strongly. That's the wall. I think as I look at some of the stats about where we're at as a culture right now, I see all the indicators that tell me that people are having experiences where they're hitting the wall. I was noticing in a recent news story that alcohol sales in the United States overall are up 55%. For hard liquor, up 75%, for beer, 66%, for wine, 42%. I think that's an indicator that people are trying to sort of ignore the wall they're hitting and medicate past it. We also see that things like snacks and comfort food sales are soaring. For the first couple of 3 weeks as we went into shelter in place where I live, it was really fascinating at the grocery stores because there was plenty of produce. There were plenty of bananas and apples and kale. What was missing were all of the snacky snack stuff, the chips and the crackers and the salty this and the sugar sweet that. That was the thing that was missing. And I think that's another indicator of people hitting the wall. Another indicator to us is how we're spending our time. Of course, streaming services, all of that kind of content is way, way up. We are trying in a way to buffer ourselves from recognizing that we've hit a wall. We don't want to admit that we're just sort of, I don't know what to do next. I'm totally overwhelmed. And so we will self-medicate. We will medicate through food. We'll zone out through different venues of media. We'll get right back in just a moment. I got a care package in the mail that came just in time to engage in some self-care right when I needed it most. I've gotten to try the new 3 Graces lip glosses and a couple of their other skincare products, and I absolutely love them. 3 Graces products are made of ingredients that are healthy, so I don't have to worry about toxins. And here's the other thing I love. 3 Graces' mission is not just to treat your skin, but to lift your soul. It's this beautiful combination of amazing beauty products with faith, developed by 2 women who understand the source of true beauty. Find out more by going to 3gracesbeauty.com. That's 3 as in the number 3, not the word, 3gracesbeauty.com. Now, the thing is, I think we think that this is a completely new human experience, right? To hit the wall, to hit that place that you just don't know how much further you can go and how much more you can do. And yet, when I look back in the Word of God, I actually find several examples of people who hit the wall. I look at the case of Noah. In the book of Genesis in chapter 9, he comes off of this huge mission of building the ark. And he not only spends all this time building the ark, then he gets all of these people into the ark and all of the animals, and they have this experience where flood wipes out the world. His family is saved. They come to rest on Mount Ararat. They exit the ark. He has now safely gotten examples of humanity and examples of wildlife and creation into an environment where they can flourish again. He comes through all of that, this huge, huge pandemic of floodwaters. And then what happens? Well, his kids find him passed out from a lot of the wine that he developed himself once he started farming again. And it's my suspicion that he hit a wall of not knowing what his purpose was anymore. For some of us, that wall is we were in a particular job and now we've been furloughed. Boom, we're into the wall. For some of us, we may really thrive during this time of pandemic and stay at home. It may be on the other side that we need to be paying attention. Because if we found that we were thriving and doing well in the center of this when other people seem to be struggling, as things begin to open up again, just like it did for Noah, once things started opening up again post-flood, that's when he found his struggle, and that's when the wall hit him. I look at the case of Elijah in the book of Kings, 1 Kings and 19. He had been through one of the most miraculous, huge events of his entire career when he called out the priests of Baal and he caused water to fall through God's miraculous help in the midst of a drought. An incredible career-making moment. And what comes on the flip side of it? Well, his critics show up, Queen Jezebel. She begins making all kinds of threats against him. He escapes to the wilderness. And while he's out there, he's basically like, it's over. I'm done. I hate life. He hit the wall. And then I look at the case of Miriam. She is the sister of Moses. And Numbers chapter 12 tells us of a time where Moses is coming more and more into his own. And she starts really having this sense of feeling out of control. And she and her brother Aaron, they get together and they have a little gossip sesh about Moses. And they really chat it up and they're really frustrated because he's not leading the direction they want to go. They aren't sure they're in agreement with the way that people are really following after him. She has hit a wall of feeling out of control. And when she hits that wall, the symptom, just like some people turn to self-medication, just like some people turn to shopping or comfort food or watching Netflix for hours on end, she turns to gossip to try to help herself make her feel better, feel more in control. And that wall is a big one, and some real consequence comes for her as a result of that wall. See, here's the thing that I'm noticing. Nothing brings out the chinks in our armor like a crisis. Have you noticed that? Like, our strengths can be so powerful when we have to just sort of gear up and figure out what to do. But at the same time, the exhaustion from having to do that can also show up in the places where we have some weaknesses that get exposed in the middle of this. So what do we do? What do we do when we hit the wall? How do we navigate forward from that moment? Because here's part of what I think has happened to us. When all of this started, I don't know about you, but I thought, okay, it'll be a week or two and we'll take some time. We'll take a pause. This will be good. And everybody will kind of calm down and all the contagion stuff will calm down. And then we will, what? You fill in the blank. You already know what it is. And then everything will go back to normal. Let me tell you something. When I head out on a run that I know is going to be a couple 3 miles, the pace at which I run that, I'm just running it to get it over with, right? Like I just take off and like, okay, I got to go from here to here and circle back to the house. And wow, I've only got this amount of time and then I got to get on to the next thing. And so my pace when I take off trying to do that is a whole lot different than the pace that I hit when I know that I'm running a half marathon. Wildly different. For a lot of us, myself included, when all this started, I took off at a pace that was a whole lot faster. And here we are, and doesn't it feel like the finish line keeps getting moved, right? I mean, in the city in which I live, the stay-at-home orders have been extended, I think at least maybe 2 or 3 times, and it sounds like they're going to be extending them for my city again. And it may be the same case for you. So these dates that we've had on the calendar that we thought, okay, I can keep a pace like this up to this point, and then it gets changed, that is prime ground for hitting a wall. So here are some takeaways, some tools, some equipping on how to manage when you hit the wall. First thing I want you to be aware of, a wall is a wall, big or small. A wall is a wall, big or small. Let's face it, we're reading lots of stories that are just gut-wrenching about people who are being impacted by COVID-19, people who have lost loved ones, people who have had to say goodbye to their loved ones over FaceTime, people who have lost jobs, people who are dealing with such heaviness. And in comparison, if we hit a wall on a random Tuesday because one of our kids dropped their glass of milk and we freak out at a level that is in exponential growth far beyond the actual event of what just happened, we can feel guilty for the wall we just hit. Now, do I think it's helpful to keep things in perspective? Absolutely. I never want to be the kind of individual who is so self-involved that I take something that's smaller in my world and try to make it seem as big as a loss or a huge tragedy in someone else's world. Perspective is good for us. But here's the part that sometimes we can manufacture in a way that's not healthy for us, is we can minimize the things and ignore the symptoms of what's really going on with us when we look at it in perspective of some of the bigger things that people go through. So I want you to give yourself permission to remember this very Seussical phrase that I've written. But a wall is a wall, big or small. When you hit a wall, even if it seems like it's over something so little, I want you to acknowledge it. Wow. My heart, my mind, my soul, my physical body, I am running on fumes here. I am really hitting a place where I feel like I have nothing more to give. That is step number 1 in beginning to navigate the walls that are going to hit us during this time. Here's step number 2. When you hit the wall, make the call. So first we've got to acknowledge that it's a wall, big or small, but then when you hit the wall, you need to make the call. And here are some of the calls that I want you to make. First of all, call it what it is. It is hitting the wall. It is that place of overwhelm. It is that place of overstimulation. It is that place of having to have made so many decisions. In my world as a writer, there's a wall that people talk about. We call it writer's block, right? When you just hit that place where you just feel like, I cannot write one more sentence. But what it really is at the core of it, when you think about the process of writing, you are making so many decisions every minute. Should I phrase it this way or that way? Should I use this word or that word? Is this a sentence that's going to propel forward what I'm trying to communicate? And when I get to the end of a writing session, I'm mentally exhausted because I've had to make so many decisions. Well, that is what this situation in the pandemic is, for all of us, it is constantly rethinking and reframing so many decisions. If we've never home educated our kids before, and now we're having to make all kinds of decisions about where we're going to set up the computer and what works best for the family flow and who's going to be overseeing this, because you've got the Zoom conference call at 10 a.m., but their math class is at 10 a.m., but your husband has this project due at 10 a.m. Who's going to be in charge? You are having to make so many decisions, and it can lead to that place of decision block, writer's block, the wall. So call it what it is. When you feel it creeping up, don't just excuse it away. Don't act like it's not a thing. Hey, I'm hitting the wall. The symptom is I feel completely perplexed and overwhelmed that the kids have to be online at 10 to take this math class. Call it what it is, own it, and define it. That's a really important part of understanding the wall that you've hit. Second call. Call a time out in the midst of this. So when you hit that wall, here's what I want you to do. You call it what it is, and then call a time out for yourself. And here's what I mean by that. Sometimes when we're already in a heightened or overstimulated state, if we try to force the issue, I got to figure it out, 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 you will just get in a loop. You will just stay, just like that kaleidoscope we sometimes get on our computer when our computer is completely overwhelmed because we've got 1,700 tabs open. Please tell me I'm not the only one who does that. That's how we can begin to feel in our minds and our spirits. We become that kaleidoscope that just forever turns and never completely engages. I want you to call a timeout for yourself. It can be a 5-minute timeout. It can be a 30-minute timeout, but I want you to call it. And when you call it, here's another call. Call a different number. And what I mean by that is this. Get in a different environment. Go outside. Or go sit in your car. Go drive around the block. Go walk around the block. Go into a room of your house that maybe you haven't actually darkened the door of since you've been home in all this time. Just go to a different environment. Call a different number, metaphorically. Do something other than what you're doing right now. Get away from your desk. Get away from the kitchen table with the kids and all of their educational supplies. That change in environment can be huge in helping your kaleidoscope brain to be able to reset just a little bit. Unplug for a minute. Call a different number. And then here is another call that I want you to make when you hit the wall. Make a literal call. I got to have some time on the phone with one of my best friends last week. It was so good for me. She's not someone I get to see real frequently. We have had a long distance friendship for a long time now. She lives a couple of hours away from me. But can I tell you that I went on a walk and I called her. And I walked and we talked. And it was so powerful. It's not even the content of what she and I were discussing. It really wasn't that. It was just a completely different moment. Because see, she and I've had this long distance friendship for a long time. Calling her and talking with her is something that's so familiar and is something that has always been. And so to be able to lean into that, even as we were discussing the situation in these current times, even as we were chatting about some of the things that we've had to deal with and changing things up, the context of the fact that I was able to call her and to have a walk with her was what was so powerful. And when I came home, it was not that she and I had reached any conclusions or solutions or anything else. It was just that I had made a literal call to someone who knows me, who loves me, and whom I love, and we just got to have time enjoying each other's voices. I want you to make a literal call to someone who fills your cup. Don't call them seeking solutions. Don't call them seeking some overly heavy level of empathy. Just call just to talk. And I promise you, running with someone in that way, running the race of life with someone with you where you can kind of chat and distract each other is a really, really powerful thing. And then, of course, there's this call that we need to make. We need to call out to God. I got to admit, I forget. Or I think that the thing I'm hitting the wall on is so minor and I feel kind of silly and I'm trying to figure out if it's just my hormones or what's going on, that I think, well, I just won't bug him with it. I mean, this is just silly. I'm looking at all the news and this is so minor. It's so minor that I got this email that really ticked me off, but now I'm in tears and I don't know why I'm reacting so strongly this way. Well, I got to say to myself, hey, Jules, a wall is a wall, big or small. That email, yeah, it triggered you. It's a small email, but it matters and it's a wall. Now I've hit the wall. I got to make the call. Okay, that email is a wall for me. I got to call it what it is. I got to call a timeout. I got to get in a different environment. I got to step back from my desk. Sometimes it's so helpful to make a call to someone who loves me and it's not email related, but in it, I need to call out to God. Lord, okay, this thing triggered me. What am I supposed to be learning? How am I supposed to be navigating? What do you want me to do in this moment? Do I rest in peace? Do I do something proactive? God, guide me. And He will. But I just can't stress enough how often, even in my own world, I often don't call out to Him when I hit the wall because I don't recognize the wall as such. All of your burdens, little or big, mean so much to Him. Don't forget to call out to Him. And then here's one more thing I want you to think about the wall when you hit the wall. Listen up, lean in. This is really important. When we are running this race of the pandemic, this long distance marathon of the pandemic, when we look over our shoulder, we're bound to hit a wall eventually. Okay, now here's what I mean. Let me unpack that for you. When we run looking over our shoulder, we're bound to hit a wall eventually. Here's what I mean. I have a lot of people in my world. I've been guilty of it myself. I keep saying or hearing people say, well, as soon as everything gets back to normal. As soon as everything gets back to normal. I mean, if we can just get through this and as soon as everything gets back to normal. Now listen, I don't want to depress you. I don't want to frustrate you. I don't want to steal your joy or your hope, but I am going to be honest with you. There's no normal we're running back to. We only get to run forward. And it may be that school launches again in the fall, just like it's always been. It may be that our churches open back up very quickly in the way they've always just been. But right now, what it looks like is it's going to be slow. It's going to be 25% capacity here and 25% capacity there, and potentially this number of students going back on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and this number of students going back on Tuesday, Thursday. And it may be that part of your team at work is able to go back in the next 3 weeks, but your particular team and the position that you fulfill, they're expecting that you're not going to be back in the office until September. Now listen. If we're running, constantly looking over our shoulder at what was, we're not going to be able to be anticipatory about how to run well moving forward. And the wall that we hit in that moment is actually a wall of our own creating. Because if I'm not willing to trust God looking forward, if I'm only willing to trust what God had for me behind, then I am absolutely bound to fall and trip over the things that I refuse to see in front of me. I don't want to discourage you as you long for the way things were, when birthday parties were a certain way, when graduations were held in a certain way. I don't want to discourage you. But I'm telling you, don't let that stuff trip you up, because it will. We all know the story of Lot's wife, and how she was leaving something and she was heading towards something and she turned and she looked back and she got frozen there. She became her own wall. She became her own impediment to anybody who might be following behind her to run into. I don't want to become a wall for anyone who is following my lead, who is watching how I'm dealing with things. And if my only game plan is to talk about when everything gets back to quote unquote normal, that's not a game plan. The terrain forward is different. The terrain forward is going to require a different kind of perseverance and patience and endurance. And you can do it. You absolutely can do it. Listen, sister, we serve a God who holds all of the past, all of the present, and all of the future in his hands. And so the only things we want to reflect back on are the testimonies of how he has carried us and provided for us and made a way for us before. But we just need to carry that testimony forward, knowing that he's got us. This is under his control. He is going to make a way. Stop looking over your shoulder and then being surprised when you run into a wall you didn't see coming because you weren't looking. All right, so let's wrap up quickly, just kind of the high points of what we want to make sure that we're doing. We're in a marathon, not a sprint. A wall is a wall, big or small. When you hit the wall, make the call. And here are some of the calls you can make. Call it what it is. You hit the wall. Call a timeout. Give yourself a pause, a beat. Call a different number. Change your environment. Make a literal call to someone who fills your cup, who knows you well, who loves you. And call out to God. And finally, keep your eyes forward. God has a destination and a place and a purpose for you, and it's not behind you, it's in front of you. Hey, I want to encourage you. Come see me on Instagram. I'm Julie Lyles Carr at all the places on the socials, and I love to hang out at Instagram. And also make sure that you are following All Mom Does, both allmomdoes.com, which is a website with all kinds of informative resources and community, and then also on the socials where there are all kinds of places you can meet women just like you navigating this wild season that we're all in together. So be sure and check out All Mom Does. And I'll be back next week with another amazing guest right here at the Modern Motherhood Podcast. Love you so much, and I'll see you next time.